What's up guys, welcome to Veldora-kun. From our previous episode, we have the most awaited Veldora's dragon form. If you haven't watched the previous episodes, I will put the link in the description below. Just a quick warning, these videos contain spoilers from the light novel. Also, don't forget to join our Discord community, Veldora-kun Subordinates. The link is in the description box. So now in this video we will review what happened next, which is the most awaited Veldora's dragon form. But before we will proceed, please like, subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell. Now without further ado, let's proceed with the video. Rimuru and Veldora felt somewhat agitated by Ramrus for making excited noises, but the sight still put a smile on their faces. Given that an official master-servant relationship was made, Beretta was now immortal inside Ramrus's labyrinth. No revival bracelet necessary. Trainee-san was without exception. Return whistle and revival bracelet were temporarily infused with Ramrus's skills, but as her servants, the two had no use for those items at all. The same logic applied for the location of resurrection. As long as the pre-positioned save points are available, they could revive wherever they wanted and didn't have to be expelled out of the labyrinth every time. In addition, they could teleport, more or less, between any save point in the labyrinth. Speaking of Ramrus's intrinsic skill labyrinth creation, Rimuru thinks it was more beneficial to her servants than herself. Also, infinite revival, the thought alone sounds terrifying already. Ramrus had only 2 people working for her now, but what if that number started going up? In the future, there would gradually be monsters born in the labyrinth. If she had full control over them, they'd be a virtual army for Ramrus. Then it would become a major power so people wouldn't look down on her and call her Chibi. With the attribute of immortality, such an army would pose a force to be reckoned with. Rimuru thinks that in terms of the defense it offered, Ramrus's skill couldn't have been any better. People just never worried about it because this was Ramrus they're just talking about. Such a cute fairy, she's just a Chibi that is afraid of being lonely. That's why Rimuru is sure she'd never even think of commanding and building an unstoppable army of invincible monsters. Now they are entering the next stage, and it's now the time to plan out the internal structure of the labyrinth. With 100 floors to fill, designing the labyrinth really was a laborious task. But it's not really a labyrinth if it doesn't have traps, so they just have to plug away at it. The first floor of the labyrinth was square-shaped with the length of 250 meters each side. It is roughly the size of Tokyo Dome, although the labyrinth as a whole gradually got narrower as you went on, forming a sort of inverse pyramid. They built it like this so that it would be convenient for Veldora's Yauki to spread out evenly since he's positioned at the bottom level. Now, time for them to confirm what sort of traps to deploy. Starting with poison arrows, these are venom-tipped missiles that fly in from out of nowhere. Poison swamps, which super poisonous swamp that will give you ailment status and HP reduction due to poisoning if you step on it. Rotating floors, it confuses the person's sense of direction. That's why it's important to bring a map. Moving floors that run by themselves, which is pretty scary. Bladed wires, if you run into it without noticing, it will get your head chopped off. It's gonna be quite vicious if paired with a moving floor. Pitfalls, travelers should be more concerned on what's waiting for them down there compared to the injuries they get from dropping into it. Mimic chest, it gives the idea of, think you found a treasure? Sorry, it's me. Exploding chests, the same with mimic chest, it's like a prank. Amazing, it's a treasure chest. Kaboom. Monster cabins, hello. About time some prey stepped in. Sealed room, well it wouldn't be a good idea to start a fire here. Dark levels, it is a common sense to bring a torch with you, right? If you didn't, I can sell you one for, let's say, 3,000 souls each? Low ceiling levels, you sure don't want to run into a monster when you're crawling on the ground now, did you? Levels with special ground effects, are you kidding me? Why is there a volcano in this labyrinth? And that's it, Rimuru listed all the possible traps that have come up, and it turned out that almost all of them are possible to make. Rimuru said, nice work, Ramrus. Are you really able to make these types of traps? And Ramrus responds, sure can. Inside the labyrinth, I can make whatever I want. Rimuru thinks she was probably right. They are on the 100th floor right now, But the air composition was no different from that on the surface. This was all thanks to Ramras's skill. Everything she accomplished with this reminded Rimuru once again of the power of Labyrinth creation. Ramras asked, "By the way, what is this sealed room? Does that count as a trap, really?" Rimuru cracked a smile upon hearing and responds, "Well, in the air, there's this gas called oxygen. Humans, or perhaps most creatures, will take in oxygen by breathing. Although sometimes you see exceptions like me or Veldora. If the concentration of oxygen drops too low, people will suffer hypoxia and maybe even kill you instantly. That's why adventurers should be cautious when faced with a room like that. That's a fixed rule of exploration. In general, it was fine if a room were sealed, but if you start a campfire or something, you could drain all the oxygen from the space, or may even cause the room to be filled with poisonous gases. The reason why you must analyze the components of the atmosphere first, whether there's poison gas and measuring the oxygen content. That's adventuring 101 right there, and if an adventurer can't even do that, he won't last long. And since magic exists in this world, so you ought to at least have wind-based magic to circulate the air around." Rimuru tried to explain it to Ramras in the easiest terms he could think of, but she didn't really get it at all. Ramras replied, "Okay, I get now that it is some vicious trap. If it doesn't affect us, I suppose I don't have to worry about it. By the way, you're scary sometimes, you know that? But you're still a great guy to have around. I sure wouldn't be able to come up with a trap like that." Ramras seemed to really believe what she said, and that kind of embarrassed Rimuru. He thinks that a fellow gamer back in his old world should be very familiar with these traps and even feel somewhat used with them. Moreover, attempting to overcome a labyrinth with these traps would likely take a couple of days. Plus, if the walls and geography were constantly changing, one must try to go all the way to the save point at the 10th floor. If it was someone like Rimuru and others who had poison nullification, also no need to breathe or eat or sleep, they should be able to conquer it using brute force, but normal people couldn't. Even heroic champions needed to rest now and then. Rimuru personally thinks that it was quite the vicious labyrinth. Rimuru got worried, "Are we perhaps setting the difficulty too high?" Where Ramras and Veldora laughed it off. Veldora replies, "Is it? I find it okay." And Ramras added, "Yeah, Rimuru. This is really nothing." So he convinced himself that, if that's the case, then there shouldn't be a problem. He was now persuaded and continued brainstorming the labyrinth design. Several days passed. Ramras joyfully prepared all sorts of traps, where Beretta and Trainee installed it for them. Rimuru had planned out the labyrinth route with Veldora. Everything had been going smoothly, but when they attempted to add terrain effect, Ramras brought up an issue. She said, "Oh, no, I can't do that. I can't sustain that much energy." Rimuru thinks it made sense, because in terms of layout, they picture floors where they would potentially run into natural disasters like fire level, frozen level or a storm level. And he guesses creating a volcano is a no-go. He have come to believe that they could do anything with magic without considering the practical issues. So he says, "I see you have a point. Sorry, Ramras. I probably went too far." But before he could finish, a familiar voice interrupted. Milim said, "Can't that be solved if you capture a fire or ice dragon, tame them, and bring them in here? I could even catch them for you." Rimuru thinks that the voice sounds really familiar, and the person who owns it shouldn't be there in the first place. He turned around to see a pair of platinum pink ponytails framing a face staring right at him. It was Milim. He responds, "Hey. What are you doing here, Milim?" This was level 100 underground. In other words, this was the very bottom level of Labyrinth, and it wasn't open to the public, so there shouldn't have been any way to get inside. So why was the Demon Lord Milim grinning at me in here? Even Wisdom King Raphael seemed to have noticed it, but intentionally didn't report it to Rimuru since Milim didn't have hostile intent against him. Rimuru knows he gave the initial order, but maybe he should reassess the command. Raphael was so inflexible like that, what a headache. Wisdom King Raphael went silent. Milim stood proudly, "You looked like you were doing something interesting here, so I came by to see. And you've ousted me without notice, how dare you, Rimuru?" On her fists were the pair of dragon knuckles that didn't match with the rest of her attire. It looked very much like Milim's style. She really was just a punk kid after all. Rimuru couldn't really reject her and Veldora said, "Heh, so it's Milim. This is noble work, performed by grown-ups, it doesn't suit children like you. We are not playing around here, so stay out of our way." Veldora slanted towards Milim and said so while feeling justified. Rimuru didn't have the chance to respond to her since Veldora already shut her down. This was work, more or less, but it sure didn't feel that way to Rimuru. Also, not only Veldora, even Ramrus decided to chase after Veldora's footsteps. She said, "My master is right. We're on work duty right now, so an idler like you should just go home." The poor Chibi was immediately trapped in Milim's iron grasp. Her courage was commendable, but she also needed strength to back it up. Rimuru lacked that sort of courage, so he decided to just go with the flow. "What do you mean? It looks interesting? What were you referring to?" "It was all because of your letter that we are planning this huge festival." And Milim replies, "What? Didn't you ignore my letter?" Where Rimuru replied back, "Of course not. Seriously, we are doing this to receive demon lords, you know. I'm not about to piss them off for no reason." Up until now Milim was looking displeased, although contented that Rimuru didn't forget about her request. She immediately regained her jovial mood, to the displeasure of someone else. Ramrus began to throw her tantrum. "Hold on, Rimuru. I'm a demon lord too, you know. Just like you and Milim, a member of the OCTAGRAM." And Rimuru justifies, "Ramrus, I didn't even need to send you an invite, not after you moved here without permission." Where Milim got surprised, "What? You moved here? Ramrus, could it be that you are living with Rimuru now?" Ramrus was now the one who had lost her cool. "That's right. I was not invited, but the invitation doesn't even matter. Also, I'm not gonna be alone in the future anymore since I'm living with Rimuru and everything too." Rimuru thinks that Ramrus' statement was meant to be misunderstood. Milim replies, "How cunning and cheeky of you. I wanna live here too." And Ramrus fires back, "Haha, I came here for work. I'm helping Rimuru, and I'm not some overbearing, unwelcome houseguest like you." Which made Milim furious. "What? How dare you say that?" And they both argued with each other with no one who wants to back down. As for Rimuru, he just stood back and watched to avoid being affected. Their exchanges of insults were all awful and would probably only make any listener laugh. Ramrus occasionally accentuated her disses with a flying kick to Milim, to which Milim would chase after her in an attempt to grab onto Ramrus. These two fellows had long been acquainted, so perhaps this was just their way of expressing affection. And that's it for my video. Sorry if I wasn't able to upload for a long time. Thank you so much everyone. See you on my next upload.